Matt and Burke, I have a question. What do you have on the execs at Sony? Like, what blackmail do you have that allows you to keep writing hunks of shit like Morbius and Gods of Egypt? And how did you trick them into letting you write a second film in Sony's Spider-Verse after making Morbius? Like, how? Sum it up for me, please. Zoidberg, tell them how I feel about this film.
Your music's bad and you should feel bad.
Don't get me wrong, there were like 3 good concepts in this film. The obvious one being a Terminator superhero film sounds like fun. Deja vu being a trippy gimmick that allows a character to redo because they failed. That's also kind of cool. You rarely see superheroes fail. And finally, a Spider-Woman for once. All 3, awesome. Although, just to be clear, we don't need 3 Spider-Women. We need 1. And since she's the biggest star, we're going to move forward with Sydney Sweeney in this rewrite. This movie could have been a massive course correction that kickstarted their Spider-Verse. It could have connected several films while moving us forward, but it failed in every way, so let's rewrite Madame Webb. We open on a man breaking into a museum and stealing a ring. He's caught, but he uses the ring on a door as he disappears through it. By the time security catches up, he's already gone. In another dimension, we see the man approaching a being called the Gatekeeper. Now, in the comics, he's made of, like, spiders, so let's just say he looks like an old-timey god. Anyway, the figure reveals himself to be Marcus Lyman, aka Massacre. What are you doing in my domain? I wish to deal. I will surrender myself, my mind, my body, my soul, to be your avatar in the real world. And in exchange, I want you to send me somewhere specific. Give me 24 hours to conduct my business. And when the clock runs out, I'm yours. Deal. Where am I sending you? Not where. When. And title card. We then hear a buzz. It's an alarm clock waking up Cassie. We see Cassie Webb's large apartment. It looks similar to the Bowery in Gotham Knights. She takes the time to slowly make a cup of coffee, but before she can drink it, an alert goes up. She gets on the headset and makes a call. Peter, we have activity on the Upper East Side. A potential robbery. You got it? And it's a montage, kind of like this from Supernatural Season 6, Episode 4. I think Bobby's Day. It's a great episode. Go watch that. Supernatural's great. But like this sequence. During the sequence, we get mentions of Peter, Eddie Brock, Dr. Morbius, and yes, Julia Cornwall, aka our only Spider-Woman for this film. She even drops by. We get to see Sydney Sweeney in full costume at this point. Madame Webb is the heart of the operation, dealing out jobs and intelligence when needed. It's a long day, and we end with her comforting and cuddling with her white cat. She wakes up the next morning, but her cat is missing. She gets an alert, and when she jumps on the phone to call Peter, there's no answer. She goes into the city into his apartment, but Peter doesn't live there. She calls Eddie Brock, and he picks up the phone, but he says, "Who the hell is this, and who the hell is Peter Parker?" It's at this point that Cassie begins to get a migraine. She can feel a flux in her powers. Something is wrong. Cassie does some research. There's no evidence of a Peter Parker ever existing. But she does see that Richard and Mary Parker died as a result of a plane crash. But the year's wrong. In her timeline, they died in 2003 in a plane crash. But in this timeline, in whatever's going on, they died in 1995 while Mary Parker was still pregnant. She continues to do research and finds out that the ring was stolen and puts 2 and 2 together. She uses her powers of astral projection to speak to the Gatekeeper in the other dimension. During their conversation, the Gatekeeper tells her that he allowed Massacre to travel back in time to clear up an old vendetta before taking his soul. The Gatekeeper offers her a chance to take Marcus's place, but Cassie refuses. There's more than one way to travel in time. Cassie uses an old spell to travel back in time, but at great expense. A large chunk of her hair goes silver. The more she uses her powers, the more color she loses, just as a fun visual way for us to kind of see what's going on and where she's at as far as, how much power she has left. She arrives, and it's 6 p.m., April 14th, 1995. We get a feel of New York City at the time. Old posters, old music, old movies. It feels like a time capsule. Cassie takes a cab to the airport to stop the Parkers from getting on the commercial plane. She explains that she's a friend, but that they have to come with her. They don't believe her because, duh, why would you? And that's when Cassie tells Ben Mary is pregnant. Mary looks shocked. How do you know? No one knows. Cassie responds, "It's a boy, Mazel Tov. Now we have to go." She then starts to get a headache. A massacre strikes. He shoots and blows up multiple sections of the airport. Cassie, Ben, and Mary run into a trap where Cassie is killed. But that's when the deja vu kicks in and we jump backwards. And we jump back to before she's killed. On the replay, they go in a different way. But again, it's noticeable she has a little more white in her hair. Cassie explains, as best she can, that Massacre is here to kill them because of who their son becomes. She does not tell them that they die. She can't give too much away. While hiding out, it becomes clear that Cassie cannot save them on her own, so she tries pulling help out from the ether. We hear her say, "I can't find Peter. There's no Miles. Brock is too unstable. Julia, the connection's starting to break," so she grabs someone and pulls them through the portal and into her world. It's Julia Cornwall, aka Sydney Sweeney. We saw her from earlier. Cassie briefs Julia very quickly about what's going on, and with her powers being in flux. She also explains the Parkers, Massacre, trying to kill them, everything. They have to either beat Massacre or run out the clock until 5 a.m. And it's only 7 p.m. So they have a long night ahead of them. Richard asks, do we even stand a chance? Cassie says, we have a Spider-Woman. She's more than qualified to handle a little gun-toting Marine. How long have you had your powers? Julia, kind of shy, nervous, not as confident as when we first saw her. 3? Cassie says, 3 years. Okay, still fresh, but we can make that work. You still have all your powers. And that's when Julia says, 3 weeks. I'm still learning. I barely met Peter. And Cassie says, oh, fuck. Richard chimes in, can't we just hold out at my office? I have experimental tech. We can hold out there. We get a montage of them going to Oscorp, but it gets blown to shit, with Cassie waking right back up at the moment where we were at. More hair, white. Nope, he's watching us there. Looks like our best option is to keep moving. It's harder to hit a moving target, right? It's at this point that we have Mary Parker asking Cassie about her son. Cassie hypes up Peter and Mary looks proud. But that's when Julia chimes in when Ben and Mary aren't near. Shouldn't we tell them the rest of the story? Cassie tells her they cannot mess up the timeline any more than they already have. On the subway, we get another sequence of the group running while the cops and others are being taken down by Massacre. When Julia tries to act, she freezes in the moment, with Cassie being killed. We hit the replay button again with Cassie's hair becoming more and more white. They go in a different direction on the subway station with Massacre getting his hands on Julia. They regroup with Julia trying to figure out how she can use her powers to help. What can she do? Her spider sense keeps going off, but Cassie passes out. When she wakes up, they're at a vet clinic. It's 1:30. Richard did a few x-rays. Cassie's injuries from each time she's gone back, they're accumulating. Each time she's been killed. Yes, she's able to rebound, but it takes more and more out of her. She's not sure how many more times she can do this, but she has to try. It's at this point that Julia lets it slip. Yeah, Peter wishes you could see, and the cat's out the bag. Cassie comes clean about the events of their death. The parents are beside themselves, with Richard asking what can be done. But nothing. There's nothing that can be done. If they survive, Peter never becomes Spider-Man. And people will die. If they change things too much, time will be thrown off balance and everything collapses. Richard and Mary Parker take a moment. They'll fight for their son, and they'll fight for his future. They take the vet's van to the bridge to try and get out of New York City when Massacre appears again. You girls are amateurs. She didn't even notice the tracking device I placed on her jacket. That explains why her spider sense kept going off, but she didn't know how to read it. Massacre nearly blows up the bridge when Julia is able to take him to the floor. While she's untrained, she has superhuman strength and speed. Massacre is still able to match her with his experience. Julia asks, why kill the Parkers? Massacre says, why did Spider-Man let my wife die? And it's at this point that we find out his wife was a casualty on one of Spider-Man's fights. Julia says he can't save everyone. To which Marcus says, no, but he should have saved Judy instead of me. He fires with Cassie taking the bullet, once again hitting replay, but almost all her hair is white now and she's exhausted. The group managed to get away. It's 3:30 a.m., but he's not going to stop. So they're going to have to stand and they're going to have to fight. They end up at an abandoned warehouse with old tech. Richard is able to set up a few traps. Mary and Cassie are packing some bottles with gunpowder. Mary gives Julia a letter. She wrote it while they were finding the warehouse. She asks Cassie to give it to Peter from her and Richard. And please, take care of my son. Julia changes into her Spider-Woman costume. It's an ugly prototype. She's doubting herself. She's already failed so many times. But Cassie tells her, wearing this costume is a privilege. You need to earn this. Now. And the climax is on. Massacre enters the warehouse with multiple traps going off, but none of them seem to be slowing him down. He battles Julia and has her on the ropes. But before he can kill her, Mary yells, no. Massacre drops Julia and runs at Mary. Richard jumps on him, but he gets slammed on the floor. but before he can stab him, Cassie jumps in the way of the blade. But there is no replay this time. She's lying on the floor, bleeding, yelling run, as the couple go up the warehouse. It's 4:55 a.m., and time's almost up. Julia grabs Cassie and they go to the roof. Massacre is about to kill the couple when Julia fights him again. She holds her own until he uses a concussive blast to overload her spidey sense. She can't fight. Massacre takes off his helmet and tells the Parkers, "Your son grew up to be a great hero. He's just not a good man." Cassie jumps on him and uses her last bit of strength and powers to transport Massacre back to the gatekeeper. Time's up. In the chaos, her eyes are hit and she goes blind. Cassie is on the floor bleeding, her hair now completely white. Julia crawls to Cassie and says that she's sorry. "It's okay. I shouldn't have pushed you. You did so good. You're going to be a great hero." There's a blinding light. When Cassie wakes up, there's a gatekeeper across from her. Nice play. Saving the Parkers at the cost of your own life? You're in this one. Cassie says, "I never made a deal with you." Oh, no, I'm not the one that saved you. I'm just following orders and delivering a message. Cassie looks on. We hear an alarm go off. Cassie wakes up in her apartment. Her cat's back, but her hair is now completely white. She makes her coffee, but before she can drink it, we hear, "Did you make a whole pot?" It's Julia in full costume, followed by Peter Parker, portrayed by Andrew fucking Garfield. Cassie gives Peter the letter while explaining what happened. And to this point, Peter gets kind of emotional. You know, kind of like how in the Flashpoint Paradox, where the Flash gives Batman the letter of his parents saying how proud they are of him and the good man that he becomes and being a hero. We get that point of validation for this Andrew Garfield, for this Spider-Man. Cassie then says that she's back, but she has a message from the higher-ups, I suppose. Peter and Julia ask, "What is it?" She says that there's going to be a new recruit very soon. A young kid from Brooklyn, New York. Someone by the name of Miles Morales. And yeah, give the crowd a chance to cheer and all that. Julia goes out on patrol, but before Peter can leave, Cassie pulls him back and says, "Peter, there was a second part to the message. And it's about Gwen." And credits. And there you go. We have a Terminator superhero film that includes characters that we've rarely ever seen. We connect it to 4 other films and streamline the series. We bring back a beloved character into a role that he loves. We set up for future Spider-Woman films, future Venom movies, maybe future Miles Morales movies, and The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Maybe even Spider-Gwen. There's so much, and this is where you start. Sony, you are welcome. If y'all know anything about any other scripts that need help, or that need a doctor, maybe let me know down below, and I'll catch y'all next time. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and P.S., I watched Madame Webb on Friday, and I had this whole punched out, literally by Sunday afternoon.